A quiet father is a dangerous thing to misunderstand, not because he is hiding rage, and not because he is looking for revenge, but because quiet men have had years to learn the shape of people. They know what a fake smile sounds like. They know when respect is being performed for an audience. And they know the exact moment a person stops seeing a human being and starts seeing an opportunity. My name is Harold Mercer, and for most of my life, people have mistaken me for someone harmless. That mistake has cost some of them more than they ever imagined. Before I tell you what happened at that dinner table in Charlotte, do me one small favor. Comment where you are listening from and what time it is there. And if stories about quiet fathers, cold patience, and justice that arrives without shouting are your kind of stories, subscribe to Dad's Cold Justice. It may cost you nothing, but it helps this channel more than you know. I am 70 years old. I drive a 2004 Mercury Grand Marquis that makes a sound on cold mornings like an old dog deciding whether life is still worth getting up for. My daughter Claire has been trying to get me to replace it since the Obama administration. The paint used to be champagne gold. Now it is something between old biscuit and tired sunlight. The driver's seat has a crack that I cover with a folded towel. And the radio only works when the road is smooth and the Lord is feeling generous. I live in a small brick house in Dilworth, not far from East Boulevard in Charlotte, North Carolina. It is the same house my late wife Eleanor and I bought 33 years ago, back when the front porch needed painting, the kitchen window stuck in the summer, and we had just enough money to argue over curtains. The neighborhood has changed. The coffee got fancier. The cars got quieter. But the old oaks still lean over the sidewalks like they are listening. And on Sunday mornings you can still smell cut grass and somebody's bacon before church. My neighbor, Mr. Vernon Price, is 76 years old, a retired school principal, and a man who believes every problem in America could be solved with better manners and sharper hedge clippers. He once told me over the fence that I was the most ordinary man he had ever known who somehow never seemed worried about bills. I told him ordinary was a fine thing to be. He laughed. I laughed. And then he spent 15 minutes explaining why his azaleas were offended by the weather. What Vernon Price does not know, what most people in my church do not know, and what the young salesman at the dealership did not know when he called my Mercury a classic with a little too much pity in his voice, is that I own Hawthorne Meridian Group. It is a private holding company with logistics, commercial real estate, original media, and storage facilities spread through North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and one boring but useful slice of Ontario. Its value changes with the market, but the last full appraisal put it just under $8 billion. Claire Mercer Lowell is 35 years old, and she is the greatest achievement of my life. I have signed deals that made lawyers go silent. I have bought properties no one believed could be saved. I have walked into rooms where men twice as loud as me found out loud was not the same thing as strong. None of that comes close to raising Claire. She has her mother's kindness, my stubbornness, and a laugh that starts in her shoulders before it reaches her mouth. When she was 9, she wrote me a contract saying she would wash the dishes for 2 full weeks if I let her keep a stray gray kitten she found behind the church fellowship hall. The contract had clauses, penalties, a witness signature from our pastor's wife. I told Eleanor that night, this child will either become a lawyer or overthrow a small government. Claire became neither. She became a pediatric occupational therapist, which is better, because she helps children learn how to hold spoons, tie shoes, and believe their bodies are not betraying them. 2 years and 8 months ago, Claire brought home Austin Lowell. I will be fair to Austin, because fairness is a habit that protects a man from becoming the thing he dislikes. Austin is handsome in the polished way of men who have never accidentally left the house without checking themselves in a mirror. He is 39, dull, athletic, with teeth so white they looked professionally lit. He wears Italian loafers, talks about leadership podcasts, and has a way of touching your elbow when he speaks that makes every sentence feel like networking. 6 months after he married Claire, Austin was appointed CEO of Catawba Freight Solutions. Now listen carefully, because this is where the hinge of the story begins to turn. Catawba Freight Solutions, is one of Hawthorne Meridian's operating companies. It has 537 employees, 3 warehouses near Charlotte, routing contracts throughout the Southeast, and a main office off Westinghouse Boulevard, which is a perfectly sensible place for a logistics company in Charlotte because it sits near I-77, I-485, and the airport corridor. Austin believed he had earned that job through a clean national search. In a way, he had. There was a recruitment firm. There were interviews. There were psychometric assessments, board reviews, reference calls, strategy presentations, and a compensation committee that used the word alignment so often. I almost began to resent the English language. What Austin did not know was that every resume, every interview note, every whispered concern, every final recommendation came across my desk before it ever reached the board. I watched him closely. I saw the strengths. Austin was not stupid. That is important. Villains are easier to hate when they are stupid. But most damage in this world comes from people who are competent enough to open doors and arrogant enough to believe those doors belong to them. He understood margins. He understood customers. He understood how to make a room feel like he was the only person moving forward. So I approved him. I gave him the keys to a company I had built, and I hoped marriage to my daughter might teach him what success alone never could. The night he got the offer, he texted me. Huge day. Harold. CEO role secured. Claire is over the moon. Proof that work ethic wins. I looked at that text for a while, then typed, "Proud of you. Soln. Do good work." He replied with a fist bump emoji. I put the phone down, went outside, and watered Eleanor's rosemary by the back steps. I wanted Austin to become better than his first impression. I have watched people grow. I have hired men who entered my office too full of themselves and left years later with humility, disciplina, and a better understanding of the people who emptied trash bins after they went home. I know first impressions can lie, but Austin did not become better. He became clearer. It began with little things. At a company picnic, he introduced me to one of his vice presidents by saying, "This is Claire's dad. Harold. Retired. Keeps himself busy with old cars and tomato plants." He said retired the way someone might say housebroken. The vice president smiled kindly, and I shook his hand like a sweet old man who did not own the parking lot under his shoes. The real sentence came 4 months before the dinner. I had stopped by Catawba Freight's office to sign documents through one of my holding representatives. I wore khakis, a gray sweater, and the same brown shoes I wear to the grocery store. No one stopped me. No one looked twice. That has always been one of the advantages of looking like you, belong nowhere, important. As I passed the hallway outside the executive suite, I heard Austin's voice through a cracked conference room door. He was talking to 2 senior managers, and his voice had that relaxed cruelty men use when they think the person they are discussing is too far away or too powerless to matter. "Claire's father," he said, "is a sweet old relic, harmless as a hymn book, peaked somewhere around the early 90s. I think he drives that ridiculous Grand Marquis and still thinks handshake deals run the world." One of the managers laughed. Austin continued, "Claire feels responsible for him. You know, only child. Widowed dad. It's touching, but it can be a lot. You marry the woman. You inherit the museum." Then he laughed too. "A sweet old relic, harmless as a hymn book. You inherit the museum." I carried those words for 4 months. They did not burn. Burning is for people who need immediate heat. I let them cool into something harder. The invitation came on a Wednesday evening in April. Claire called me while I was trimming the rose bushes by the side fence. Her voice was bright, hopeful, careful, in that way adult children sound when they want divorced worlds to become one family for a night. Though in this case no one was divorced. Austin's parents, Warren and Diana Lowell, were hosting dinner at their house in Myers Park, near Queens Road West. "Just a family dinner," she said. "They really want to know you better." Dad. I had already known Warren and Diana Lowell for years, though they did not know they had known me. Warren had spent his career in boutique investment banking, which is a way of saying he helped rich men package ambition into brochures. Diana chaired committees, hosted luncheons, and had mastered the special southern art of insulting someone so politely the wound needed a minute to find itself. Their house was large, their debts were larger, and their oldest son had married my daughter. I'm sure it will be lovely. Sweetheart, I said. She exhaled like I had given her a gift. I told her I would be there Saturday at 6. Austin called me the next morning, which told me more than the call itself ever could. He sounded cheerful, brisk, and faintly strained, like a man carrying a glass bowl across a marble floor. Hey, Harold, just wanted to touch base about Saturday. Mom and Dad are pretty formal, not stuffy, just traditional. So maybe wear something a little sharper than usual. You know, jacket, decent shoes, nothing wild. I looked down at the gardening gloves in my hand. That is thoughtful of you. Austin, I said, just want everyone comfortable. He replied, Claire gets nervous when worlds collide. You know I do. I said, I will see you Saturday. I chose brown slacks, a plain white shirt, an all-navy cardigan, and the same scuffed leather shoes I polish every Friday night out of habit. Clean, modest, unmistakably not sharp. Then I stepped outside and looked at the Grand Marquis sitting in the driveway, its hood reflecting a broken stripe of afternoon light. We're going to a fine house Saturday. Old boy, I told it. Try to embarrass me with dignity. Here is what Austin did not understand. I was not dressing that way because I had nothing better. I was dressing that way because I wanted to remove every excuse. I wanted Warren, Diana, and Austin to meet the exact version of me they believed was beneath them. I wanted to see who they were when they thought there was no cost attached to cruelty. In business, that is called due diligence. In family, it is called pain. On Saturday evening, the Mercury complained all the way to Myers Park. But it made the trip. I drove past houses with deep lawns, old trees, gas lanterns, and driveways curved in ways that suggested arrival was meant to feel ceremonial. The Lowell house sat behind a low brick wall and black iron gates, a cream-colored Georgian with columns, tall windows, and landscaping trimmed so carefully it seemed afraid of being itself. A young valet stood by the circular drive, wearing a vest and the expression of a college student who had been told rich people tip well if you survive them. I pulled in behind a black Range Rover and in front of something German and quiet. The valet looked at my Mercury, then at me, then at the Mercury again. In the space of 2 seconds, he performed an entire financial biography and found me lacking. Good evening, sir, he said. I can park this for you. Thank you. Also, the trunk sticks unless you ask politely, and the left turn signal sometimes keeps celebrating after the turn is over. He blinked, unsure whether to laugh. I handed him the keys and walked toward the front door. Warren Lowell opened it before I rang. He was 73, tall, lean, silver-haired, and dressed like a magazine advertisement for retirement without consequences. Linen jacket, open collar, loafers that had never met a puddle. His smile was measured to the inch. Harold, he said, extending his hand. At last, we are delighted. Diana Lowell appeared from the sitting room wearing pearls, pale silk, and a smile polished to a mirror shine. Harold, she said, taking my hands in hers. Claire has told us so much about you. You are exactly as dear as I imagined. Dear, there it was. Not capable. Not interesting. Not even funny. Dear, a word for handwritten recipes. Old dogs. And men no one expects to challenge a room. I smiled. You have a beautiful home. Diana. Her eyes warmed immediately. People who use houses as armor love when you compliment the shine. Claire came from the dining room and hugged me tightly. She smelled like lavender and the same vanilla lotion she had used since college. You made it, she whispered. Always, I said. Austin stood behind her, looking at my cardigan. To his credit, he recovered quickly. Harold, he said, clapping my shoulder. Glad you could come. Dad opened a bottle from Napa for tonight. Special occasion. Special became the word of the evening. Special wine. Special salmon flown in from the Pacific Northwest. Special crystal inherited from Diana's aunt. Though I suspected the aunt would have been surprised by that story. Special son. Special future. Everything was special except the old man in the cardigan, who had been seated 3 places away from his own daughter beside a retired neighbor of Warren's who wanted to explain pickleball to me. I sat. I unfolded my napkin. I became exactly what they needed me to be: pleasant, grateful, slightly overwhelmed. I asked questions I knew the answers to. I complimented the wine because it mattered to Warren. I told Diana the hydrangeas were lovely because it mattered to Diana. I laughed when Austin made a joke about shipping margins that he had used before at a quarterly review, though he did not know I had read the transcript. For nearly 2 hours, Warren held court. He talked about interest rates, legacy families, a club renovation, and how difficult it was to find real leadership anymore. Austin, he said, has rare instincts. Catawba Freight was fortunate to get him. A man like that changes the temperature of a company. Diana turned to Claire during the salad course and said, "You must feel so relieved. Darling, a husband with real drive is a blessing. So many young women today are forced to carry men." Claire's fork paused. Austin looked into his wine. Warren smiled, as if a truth had been gently placed on the table. But I had learned long ago that if you interrupt someone halfway through revealing themselves, you only get half the truth. So I lifted my water glass, took a slow sip, and waited. The truth arrived with dessert. Diana's lemon cake had just been served when Warren placed a slim leather folder beside his plate. The room shifted, not visibly to everyone. Perhaps, but I felt it. Austin's back straightened. Diana's smile became fixed. Claire's eyes moved from the folder to her husband and then to me. She had not known. That mattered. "Harold," Warren said, lowering his voice into the tone men use when they want manipulation to sound like stewardship. "There is something we hope to discuss tonight. As family." He slid the folder across the table. It stopped beside my coffee cup. I looked at it. I did not touch it. "Go on," I said. "Austin has been approached with an extraordinary opportunity," Warren continued. "A venture of his own, independent, scalable, with the right capital. It could become a national platform within 5 years. He has outgrown merely running someone else's company." Merely, I thought. Catawba Freight had paid Austin more in 1 year than my father had earned in 20. But I said nothing. "What we are proposing is elegant," Warren said. "Claire's future inheritance could serve as collateral for a bridge facility. Not a gift. Not a handout. Collateral. Properly documented. Naturally, your blessing would allow us to move quickly while preserving everyone's dignity." Diana leaned forward. "We would never want Claire exposed to uncertainty," she said, in a voice designed to sound maternal rather than predatory. "But family helps family rise." Claire stared at Austin. "You discussed my inheritance?" she asked softly. Austin reached for her hand. "Baba, it's just a structure. Nothing happens without your comfort. We were going to walk everyone through it." I picked up the folder. I opened it. I read every page. The table grew quiet. Warren watched me like a banker watching a borrower. Diana watched Claire. Austin watched the folder, as if the paper might turn into a future he had already spent in his imagination. The document was not illegal. It was worse in some ways. It was clean, polished, professionally drafted. A bridge loan secured by assets expected to pass to Claire upon my death, supported by a letter of intent, projected distributions, and a guarantee structure that assumed I was just informed enough to be flattered and just uninformed enough to sign away leverage. It was, in its own narrow way, a beautiful trap. I closed the folder. I placed my palm on it gently. Then I smiled at Warren. "I appreciate the effort that went into this," I said. "These decisions should not be rushed. Let me review it carefully." Relief moved around that table, like air returning to a room. Austin exhaled. Diana touched her necklace. Warren gave a grave nod. The way men nod when they believe patience has become consent. Claire was still looking at me. She knew me well enough to recognize calm, but not this kind of calm. For the next 20 minutes, I discussed lemon cake, North Carolina weather, and a charity auction Diana wanted Claire to attend. I thanked them for a lovely evening. At the door, Warren shook my hand again, longer this time, warmer, because in his mind, I had moved from harmless to useful. The valet brought my Grand Marquis around. The car coughed once. As if offended by the architecture, I tipped the young man $100. His face changed completely. Thank you, sir. I nodded. Take care of yourself. So. Then I drove home through the soft yellow pools of Charlotte streetlights with Warren's folder on the passenger seat and my daughter's stunned face in my mind. I did nothing visible for 12 days. That is the part impatient people never understand. Power does not always move when it is insulted. Sometimes it waits until the insult invites evidence to sit down beside it. On Sunday, I went to church. On Monday, I took the Mercury for an oil change and listened to a mechanic half my age explain transmission risk to me with great seriousness. On Wednesday, I helped Vernon Price carry mulch from his truck. On Thursday, Austin texted, "Hope you've had a chance to review. Timing is getting important. Exciting window here." I waited 4 hours and replied, "Still looking things over. Big decisions deserve care." He wrote, "Absolutely. Appreciate you." Harold. That afternoon, I made 3 calls. The first was to Hawthorne Meridian's general counsel. The second was to the chair of Catawba Freight's board. The third was to an outside forensic accounting firm we keep on retainer for moments when sunlight needs help entering a room. Full scope, audit, I said. Devices, expense records, client contact, side entities, calendar activity, procurement irregularities. Quietly, immediately, the board chair, a woman named Miriam Shaw who had known me for 22 years and feared only wasted time, asked one question. "Is this about Austin?" "Yes," I said. She paused. Then she said, "Understood. Here is what Austin had forgotten, or perhaps never bothered to learn. His employment agreement contained a non-compete, non-sollicitation, confidentiality, corporate opportunity, and fiduciary duty framework strong enough to hold a bridge in a storm. I had written the original version 16 years earlier, after a different young executive tried to build a private company out of one of mine. Clauses are like fences. You hope never to need them, but you build them because some men mistake open fields for invitations. The audit took 9 business days. On the 10th morning, the report arrived in a sealed electronic folder and a physical binder brought to my house by courier. I sat at my kitchen table with black coffee and read it from beginning to end. Austin had not merely been dreaming. He had been building. For 7 months, he had used Catawba Freight's internal market data, driver network, customer contacts, pricing models, vendor relationships, and 2 company-issued devices to develop a competing logistics platform called Atlas Path. He had registered one entity through a college friend in Delaware and another through a consultant in Tennessee. He had held calls during company hours, met with potential investors while traveling on Catawba's expense account, and approached at least 4 clients, whose contracts were up for renewal. He had also forwarded proprietary documents to a private email account under the subject line, "Old Notes." Men who believe themselves clever often name their evidence poorly. The meeting was set for the following Thursday at 9 a.m. at Catawba Freight's headquarters off Westinghouse Boulevard. Austin believed it was a routine board update with legal present to review expansion risk. He liked phrases like expansion risk. They made ordinary decisions sound heroic. That morning, I went to the back of my closet and took out the charcoal suit. I had it tailored in New York 14 years earlier, after Hawthorne Meridian closed a warehouse acquisition that doubled our footprint in the Carolinas. The suit was not flashy. It did not need to be. I wore a white shirt, a dark tie, and a watch Austin would recognize if he knew enough to recognize quiet money. Then I drove the Mercury to the office. I parked in the reserved space nearest the entrance, the one marked Hawthorne Meridian Group. Austin had walked past that sign dozens of times, perhaps hundreds. He had never asked whose hands rested above the company that owned his company. Arrogance is not always believing you are better than everyone else. Sometimes it is simply failing to wonder who built the room you are so proud to stand in. At noa patru. Austin walked in carrying a leather portfolio and the kind of smile men wear when they expect mild applause. He was speaking before he finished entering. Sorry. Traffic on South Boulevard was criminal this morning. But I think you're going to like the revised growth outlook. Then he saw me. I have watched markets turn. I have watched judges read verdicts. I have watched men realize a loan was being called. A merger was dead. A partner had betrayed them. Recognition has a weight. It entered Austin's face in stages. First confusion, then irritation, then calculation, then the slow, pale understanding that the old man in the cardigan from dinner was sitting at the head of his boardroom in a suit he had never imagined. Sit down. Austin, I said. I opened the binder. I am going to explain this once. Not because I enjoy drama. I don't. Not because I am angry. Anger is what people feel when the truth arrives unexpectedly. This truth has been walking toward us for some time. Catawba Freight Solutions is owned by Hawthorne Meridian Group. I said, Hawthorne Meridian is owned through several entities, trusts, and partnerships. The controlling interest is mine. It has been mine since before you met my daughter. You were hired because I approved you. You were paid well because I believed performance should be rewarded. You were given resources, authority, and a platform many people work their whole lives and never receive. For a while, I hoped you might become the kind of man who understood what had been placed in his hands. Instead, for 7 months, you used company time, company data, company devices, company relationships, and company travel to develop Atlas Path, an outside venture designed to compete directly with the company you were hired to lead. Your employment agreement covers all of this. I said, the non-compete, the non-solicitation, the confidentiality provisions, the corporate opportunity doctrine, the fiduciary duties. We have the emails. We have the call logs. We have the forwarded documents. We have the investor decks. We have the Delaware filing and the Tennessee consultant invoices. Austin's mouth opened. No sound came out. For the first time since I had known him, he looked less like a man entering rooms and more like a boy who had broken a window and hoped no one had heard the glass. I leaned back slightly. Here is what will happen. You will resign today. Effective immediately. You will sign a separation agreement, acknowledging the violations, returning all materials, dissolving or transferring any conflicting interests as counsel directs, and agreeing not to solicit Catawba clients, vendors, or employees. In exchange, we will not file suit today, and we will not make the audit public unless you force us to. His face tightened. My career, he whispered. Your career, I said, was not harmed by being caught. It was harmed by what you did before anyone caught you. I am not trying to destroy you. I said, if I wanted that, this meeting would have been in court, and Warren would already be reading about it over breakfast. I am giving you a narrow road out because Claire loves you, and I will not punish my daughter more than your choices already have. But do not misunderstand me. Narrow is not soft. Austin nodded once. His voice was quiet. I will resign. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and gathered the binder. At the door, I stopped. One more thing. The proposal your father brought to dinner. Claire's inheritance as collateral. That inheritance is no longer structured in a way that anyone can borrow against without Claire's direct and independent consent. As of yesterday afternoon, her trust has been amended, funded, and protected. Her signature alone controls any movement. Not yours, not Warren's, not mine, hers. Tell your parents I appreciated the lemon cake. I said. Then I left. Outside, the mercury started on the second try. The air conditioning made a brave noise, blew warm air for 8 seconds, and gave up. I laughed for the first time all morning. Not a big laugh. Just enough to remind myself I was still a man driving an old car through Charlotte traffic. Not a verdict carved in stone. She came to my house at 6:30 that evening. I heard her car door close. Then the quick steps up the porch. When she walked into the kitchen, her face looked like it had been holding too many questions at once. I had tea ready. Peppermint for her, black for me. Dad, she said, Austin told me he resigned. He told me there was a conflict. He told me you were there. I told her everything. Not dramatically. Not cruelly. I told her about the ownership structure. Catawba Freight. The search process. The contract. The hallway. The dinner proposal. The audit. The boardroom. And the trust amendment. I left out details that would only wound her without helping her understand. A father must know the difference between truth and shrapnel. When I finished, Claire sat very still. The kitchen clock ticked. Outside, Vernon Price's porch light came on across the fence. Finally, she looked at me, and her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. How long have you been this rich? She asked. I almost smiled. Most of my adult life. I said, why didn't you tell me? There it was. The question beneath all the others. Not why did Austin do it? Not why did Warren ask? Not why did Diana smile through it? Why did my father hide a whole life from me? I looked at my hands. They looked older that night than they had that morning. Because I wanted you to choose people without wondering whether they were choosing you back for what stood behind you. I wanted your life to be yours. I wanted every hug you gave me to be for your father. Not for a company. I wanted you to learn kindness before power could confuse it. She wiped her face with the heel of her hand. The way she had as a little girl. But I could have helped you carry it. She said, I know. I said, that was my mistake. She reached across the table and took my hand. We sat that way for a long time. 2 cups of tea cooling between us. The old house settling around us. Eleanor's rosemary moving in the dark outside the kitchen window. What happens now? She asked. That is up to you. I said, your marriage is yours. Your money is yours. Your name is yours. No one gets to use grief, family, or love as collateral, unless you sign the paper with clear eyes. And even then, I hope you call me first. She laughed through tears. It was small, but it was hers. Then she came around the table and hugged me so tightly I could feel the 9-year-old with the kitten contract, the teenager with biology notes, the grown woman who helped children hold spoons. All of them folded into the same daughter I had loved from the beginning. 3 days later, Warren Lowell called me. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message that used the words misunderstanding, overreaction, and family reputation in that order. I saved it because old habits die slowly, then deleted it because some evidence is only useful when you still intend to fight. Diana sent Claire a long text about loyalty. Claire did not answer. Austin moved into a corporate apartment in South End for what he called space. Claire called it consequence. They are still deciding what their marriage can survive. That is not my story to finish for her. As for Catawba Freight, Miriam Shaw stepped in as interim CEO and had the drivers laughing in the break room within a week. Good leaders do not need to announce that they are leaders. People simply breathe better when they enter the room. I still drive the Mercury. Claire still complains about it. Last Sunday after church, Vernon Price leaned over the fence and asked whether I had finally scared somebody important because 3 men in suits had come by the house while he was watering his azaleas. I told him they were selling windows. He said, Harold, you are a terrible liar. I said, Vernon, you are a terrible gardener. We both laughed, and he went back to insulting the weather. People think power looks like a gate, a tailored suit, a loud voice, a place card near the head of the table. Sometimes it does, but sometimes power looks like a quiet father in a navy cardigan, driving an old Mercury through Myers Park while people decide he is harmless. Sometimes justice does not slam a door. It waits, reads every page, signs the right document, and lets a man meet the consequences he built with his own hands. So be careful how you treat the person you believe can do nothing for you. Be careful what you say when the hallway seems empty. Be careful when you slide a folder across a dinner table and assume the old man reading it does not understand the trap. Because some men do not need to look powerful. They only need to be patient. If this story stayed with you, subscribe to Dad's Cold Justice for more stories about family, betrayal, bon patience, and the quiet kind of justice that arrives cold. And before you go, comment where you are listening from and what time it is there. I read those comments more often than you think.